Welcome to Thrive with Her, a podcast where you'll tune into conversations, not interrogations, with inspiring women of color sharing how they're transitioning from doing what they're supposed to do to living their calling.
Welcome to another episode of Thrive with Her podcast. Y'all, this episode is going to be so juicy and so awesome. I have a phenomenal guest with me. We have April Nowlin. Let me put some respect on her name, okay? She is a divorce recovery and dating coach, and I will say the self-proclaimed queen of healing after heartbreak. April, hey girl.
Thank you for having me.
Listen, it's a no-brainer. Like when someone in my network told me about you, I was just like, yes. I don't need to know her last name. Yes. Send her my email, my address, all the things, because I am beyond excited to have this conversation with you. Dig deeper into this stuff. And then to be honest, this conversation it's so pivotal, but also, like, I will not lie, I was hella nervous to like come to this space and talk to you. Not only because you're phenomenal, but also because divorce and dating and relationships, like, it's a tricky conversation in general, but even more tricky just given the fact that I went through a divorce and there were so many layers to that. So this conversation is nerve-wracking, and I know it's also going to be healing. So girl, let's get started.
Awesome.
Okay. So tell us more about you, just April, like as a human, not necessarily April as a divorce recovery and dating coach.
Yeah, so all about April.
Mm-hmm.
I am out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up in, we talked about this, St. Louis. Yes. Hot pickles. If you're from St. Louis, hot pickles.
Y'all know.
Grew up in St. Louis, but I was that kid that was like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but I would like to be Indiana Jones. Mm-hmm. Like that was I wanted the adventures, I wanted the excitement, I wanted the danger, I wanted all those things.
I love that.
And I got all those things, but I didn't get paid like Indiana got paid.
Not the paychecks were not coming through.
But when I say I love life, and I know we're going to dig into this, but a lot of people can't say that about themselves, that they truly love their life. Yeah. I love my life, and I've created a life that I love. So all the adventures, all the crazy, I hike, I do crazy things, I jump off of stuff, I travel the world, I laugh a lot.
I love it.
So all the things is April. And one thing that I can say is, being the wise old age of 46 that I am, is I have lived. So one of the things that I love to share with people is live your life. Don't wait until, well, I'm gonna do this at this age, I'm gonna do that. Do all the things.
Yeah. I mean, you're speaking to my heart. Less of a adventurous human as you. I mean, definitely open to risk taking. You know, I'll jump out of a plane or something. That's about it. Yep. But it sounds like you're doing a little bit more than I would do. But you know what? I'm gonna try, because you told me to do so, and I believe in you.
Do it.
I will. So tell us more about how you even like started your business. How did you get into doing divorce recovery and dating coaching?
So let me say this. Okay. Had you asked me 5 years ago if I would be working with women, if I would be helping women through tough times in their relationship, I would have said absolutely not. Absolutely not. I hated any women's conference, women's support group, women's empowerment.
You sound like me when I was in college.
Yes.
Say what?
Why? And the reason why is because anytime I would go to some sort of women's event, and I have a faith-based background, but faith-based or otherwise, it would be like, we cried, we shared, and then we went home, and it was like, now what? Like, what do we do? And so I always felt like it was this emotional moment, but not much substance thereafter. Okay. So 10 years ago, I actually started a business coaching business. So I've been coaching entrepreneurs for 13 years, or 10 years, 13 years total, in marketing. So that's how I started out coaching, because I love to help people transform. I love to help them grow. So 3 years ago, and we'll dig into this a little bit, but 3 years ago, or in 2019, I went through my third divorce. And so after that divorce, I was like, okay, something's
here. Something
is wrong.
Yes.
Something's happening.
Yeah.
And after my healing journey, I really felt like it was like, you know what? You need to start helping people who were in the space you were in. Because I asked myself, if I had the right help when I went through my first divorce 20 years earlier, would I still be here?
Yeah.
And I didn't see help that looked like me, that sounded like me, that was the color that I was, or even the faith that I was. Divorce was one of those things where it was such a stigma and shame tied to it that it was just like, well, you just go hide under a rock.
Literally.
And have a nice day, right? Go pray about it and have a nice day. And so I wanted to become the help that I never had. So in 2020, I said, you know what? I'm going to start doing this work. And funny enough, working with women, working with women in their relationships.
Full circle.
But I wanted to do it differently. I wanted to make sure that there was transformation happen, not just crying and emotions and all those things that we do sometimes as women we're together. I wanted transformation. And so that's how I got into the work that I'm doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you just said so much that I appreciate, and I'm grateful for you for just being so just open with your truth, but then also with the truth of many other women too. Because when I was in college, it was a similar thing where I was like, what I saw in the stereotypical containers that were created for women just didn't match where I was, or what it was that I needed, right? And a lot of times, people do say, we create things based off of our own experience, right? Like, we have gone through an experience, we realize it's a problem for many, and then we create the space to support others. And I'm so glad you did that, because now, I can come to you and feel connected to you as a coach who has similar values and also is trying to create a space that I want as well. So appreciate that. So let's rewind, because you said something, and I'm sure everybody's ears are perked. Like she said, three types?
Yeah.
Tell us more. And let me just let y'all know, April is a open and honest and unafraid woman. You heard she be jumping off of cliffs. Okay? So she's going to speak her truth. And the key thing here is that the same level of confidence and assuredness and self-love that she has, I need y'all to have that too, as she tells her truth about how she got to her third divorce. Yeah. So tell me more about those relationships.
So let me say this. The woman that you see sitting here today was not the same woman 25 years ago that started this journey, right? 5 years ago, I couldn't even have talked about the first 2 divorces. I was married 5 years ago. The first 2 divorces with confidence. And so I'll share with you how I got to this space. But like you said, I'm an open book. I'm one of those people that I feel like we don't have time to waste. So as much as I can share and help another woman, I'm going to share. And I'm going to share it all.
Yes, ma'am.
So I was 21 years old, and I'm sitting in this courtroom with my first husband, the man that I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. And it took 8 minutes for us to get divorced. 8 minutes. I went on the stand. I got asked, I think, 3 or 4 questions. We were done. Okay. What I didn't know is that experience was going to shape every decision I had with men going forward. Okay. 3 or 4 years later, I'm good to go. I am healed, right? I am doing well. I'm doing good financially. But that cycle starts of but I'm lonely. And I see all these couples. And I'm being told things like part of your value, or a big part of your value, is being married and being with this other person, right? Yeah. So I meet the next person. And during this relationship, same patterns as before. Things like, I'm now relying on this person because of rejection, because of feeling unloved. And this is the person that said, I love you. Okay, great. So the next thing, particularly in faith-based organizations, the next thing is, well, you get married. So it just made sense. You got married, right? So we get married. 3 years later, I'm now 31 years old, sitting in a courtroom, 6-month-old baby, going through another divorce. So I tell myself then, okay, this is it. I'm not dealing with men. I'm going to focus on my business. I'm going to focus on my child. But a few years later, same pattern. Those feelings of rejection and loneliness. And there's a void that was never felt or filled. Now I meet someone else. Yeah. And this time I'm a little bit wiser, right? So I'm like, I've been through a little counseling. I'm good. I'm fine. But I have a need. So I'm a single parent. This person starts helping me with my child. So I'm like, this is great. This must be it. Yeah. So what's the next thing you do? You get married.
Yeah.
So then I wake up at 41 years old to my husband saying, you know what? This is not the life I wanted. I didn't want to be a husband. I didn't want to be a stepfather. I really just wanted to be single, but I needed help paying my bills. So I'm gone. And a week later,
serious?
Gone.
Are you serious?
Dead serious. And he said all this in 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Wow.
And he was gone a week later.
Wow.
So during that time, I had to look back and ask myself, how did I get here?
Yeah.
So one of the things I tell my clients all the time, we talk about things like forgive and forget, right? People are like, you should forgive and forget. Don't ever forget. You should forgive, but don't forget. And what I mean by that is, if you find yourself out walking and you keep tripping over the same spot and falling, common sense would tell you, let me look down and see what keeps tripping me up. And so at the time of this last divorce, my daughter was 10. And so I'm asking myself, what example am I going to show her now if I continue this pattern? So I started on a year-long journey to essentially look back and say, what keeps tripping me up in this area? Because here's the crazy thing. Career-wise, doing great. Health-wise, doing great. Financially, doing great. But yet I keep ending up in these same
relationships. Yeah. And it's so important that you're bringing that up, because what you're speaking to really is just identifying a toxic relationship pattern, right? And oftentimes when we're trying to look for solutions to things that happen in our lives, we think of all the external things, right? Like, oh, well, it was just because this person gave me this advice, or maybe it was because I didn't have enough money for this specific thing, or, you know, maybe I didn't look the way that I really wanted to look, so I wasn't able to keep that person. No, all of that stuff happens internally, right? Whether it's a thought pattern, a mindset, a belief that you have about yourself, and being able to be honest about the fact that something is present, because that's the first part, right? Like, it's not just something's wrong here and then all of a sudden you just have this epiphany of what's wrong. No, there's a level of awareness and almost acceptance of the fact that first, something's wrong. I'm picking up on something smells fishy. And then it's the act and commitment to digging deep and like figuring out what that truth is. And then it keeps going, right? Because then you have to sit with that truth. You have to fully believe the truth, then act on it, and then do the behavioral shifts to change it, right? But that's the most important part of like shifting, which is what you're naming, of shifting all those different pieces. And that's a process. But a lot of us don't necessarily want to do that because it's not easy. So can you talk a little bit more about like what the experience was like as far as like emotionally speaking, physically speaking?
Yes. So you hit the nail on the head with something you just said. So in my book, shameless plug, Move the Finish Line.
Plug it. Remove the shameless and plug it.
Move the finish line. I talk about the 3 steps that I went through for that initial healing. So the first one is exactly what you said. It was facing the facts. I had to face the fact that something was wrong and the fact that I contributed to this behavior, right? So it was easy to say that I was picking the wrong person, which I was, let's be clear. But I had to ask myself why.
Yes.
Like, why do I keep ending up in this same space? So the journey, it started out with a lot of ice cream and Fireball.
What's your favorite ice cream?
Mint chocolate chip.
I can
So
feel it.
literally for the whole month of like March, that first month, it was Fireball and mint chocolate chip ice cream. Until one day my daughter, at the wise old age of 10, she walks in the kitchen, she goes, you probably should stop eating so much ice cream. And I was like, dang, but facts.
Not her reading you.
But facts. She's like, you should probably let that go. You should probably stop.
Yes.
But the emotions that I was feeling, the biggest one was failure. Because this particular marriage, my third one, was the one that I quote unquote got it right. Right. So I did all the things. We went to premarital counseling and I think we dated for a year. So we did all the things on paper that we were told to do. But at the same time, because of that, because I was dating for a need, I ended up overlooking a lot of the red flags. Okay. So the beginning of that healing journey was really a lot of failure. It was a lot of shame. It was disappointment. It was low self-esteem. It was self-sabotaging behaviors. It was all the things that we do to ourselves. And then one day I was out walking and I was angry with God. And I mean angry. I was like, you should have protected me. Why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you do, something to warn me? And he was like, would you have listened? So here's a funny story. With my first husband, I am walking down the aisle and I hear, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't. And I mean, like an audible voice. I'm in tears. And my friend's like, oh my gosh, she's so happy she's crying.
Like, that's not what's happening right now.
But I get married.
Yeah.
Ends in destruction. The second time, his mother takes me to lunch and says, do not marry my son.
Please hold. Excuse me? His mother said that to you?
His mother was like, do not marry my son. He is not ready. You know, he's all these things. Do not marry my son. But me, I'm believing what he's saying because once again, I'm blinded. And I talk about dating blind spots, but I'm blinded because of my patterns and my behaviors where I'm like, she don't know what she's talking about, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Get married. So I truly feel like God was like, look, I warned you the first time.
Facts.
I warned you the second time. You and your own.
Right. Get back to me when you figure it out yourself.
Twice. This time. And the fact of the matter is that the third one, that's the one I felt.
Yeah.
That is the one I felt. The other two, we were mutually, you know, kind of separated. The first one, we were laughing at our divorce. We knew it was over. You know, I left the second time with my daughter. But this time, this is the one that caught me off guard. This is the one that wrecked my self-esteem. This is the one that wrecked me financially. This is the one that I felt. And so when you talk about those emotions, it was like a volcano erupting. It was 20 years of patterns stuffing things down that finally exploded.
Yeah.
So every emotion I talk about, you know, after heartbreak, it's like being trapped in an amusement park and you're forced to go on these emotional roller coasters that you can't get off of.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't want to ride that ride no more.
Yeah.
And that's what it was for probably the first 6 months. It was an emotional roller coaster. I have a saying that divorce is a death. You have to grieve it. But here's the thing, it's not a death sentence. And so the same grief that we feel when a person dies, a pet dies, something in our life dies, was the same thing I felt for those first 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah. Y'all, can we have a moment of silence because she's just so phenomenal. Like, I appreciate you on so many different levels. And even as you speak, like, I'm hearing a lot of my experience too, and then also like learning, and not necessarily like learning new lessons, but just even learning the practice of like speaking about it. Because I'll be honest, there are many people who, I was saying in one of the other podcast episodes, don't even know that I'm divorced. And it's not because I'm like ashamed to say that I'm divorced. It's more of just like, I'm not walking around like, hey y'all, guess what I did? Got divorced. You know, it's been a year. I'm chill. You know, like, I'm not advertising it, but I'm more than positive that like I'm still not even in a place where I would speak as like almost like openly and effortlessly as you do around it. And it's not necessarily, again, like that there's shame connected to it, but there's this element of like culture for me too. And I'm going to ask you in a bit what other factors played into where you are right now. But like for me, being West African, being Nigerian, raised in that household, etc., I married a man who's Nigerian as well. And Nigerian, born and raised in Nigeria. I was born and raised here. And so there are a lot of like cultural practices that we engage in when people get married. And it's not just a union of two people. It is a union of families. If anything, the union of the family is what is primary. And then the two people, it's like, y'all see us? You know, like, it's us too. Hi. Right? And so when you say like divorce is a death, it wasn't only our relationship dying, it was also relationships between our parents, our families, the children that they had, like all of that stuff was also so layered, right? And because that was the case, it was almost harder to go through it from that perspective of just like family and culture than it was to go through it with just me and him. Right? Like the issues between him and I were lighter than the issues that I had with people in my family. You spoke a little bit to me, you know, about like your mother, a relationship with your mother, and how that might have influenced where you ended up. Like, Tell me a little bit more about that, like your childhood experiences in that relationship and how it contributed to where you were in these relationships.
So, had you asked me 10 years ago why I was in those patterns, I would have said, because all these men out here ain't no good.
All of them are stank. They don't know how to answer messages.
They, all these things.
It's their fault.
So the first time I went to counseling was after my second divorce.
Yeah.
And I remember the question she asked me. I sat down and she said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, I just went through this divorce and I want to be able to move on." And her first question was, "Tell me about your childhood." And I said, "This ain't got nothing to do with my childhood. Tell me how to move on from this relationship." But what I found out and what I've learned through training and the education I've received in this field is that our childhood affects every decision we make as an adult.
Yeah.
And so as I started to go back and understand where the roots of this tree were coming from, it was several different factors. I grew up in a home where my mother was a drug addict. And if you've been raised by an addict, you may tell yourself, "I'm fine because I'm not an addict."
Yeah.
But what we don't realize is that when you are raised by an addict, there are other traits that start to come out. So abandonment issues, rejection, not feeling loved. Then I go further back and I had experienced a season of molestation as a child. So now how I interact with men has changed.
Yeah.
What I expect from a man has changed because of that relationship at even such a young age. And so during counseling, one of the things that I did was I had to go way back and figure out where are these patterns coming from. And so with my mother specifically, my mother died when I was 23. She died of a drug overdose. And I remember during that season thinking to myself, how could you choose addiction over me? So now I am feeling like she rejected me for her addiction. Now, at the age that I am now, I understand addiction better, and addiction is a beast.
Yeah.
It is a beast. But at that time, it was, you didn't love me enough. So now, we get into these relationships where what I believe is love, a lot of times is manipulation.
1000%.
It's abuse, because I'm feeling like I don't know what love is. So whatever I'm being shown as love, I'm accepting as love, right? Yeah. So that's why I say, our childhoods, going back and saying, where did I stumble? What caused me to stumble in the beginning? And so counseling did that for me. It really made me reach back and understand, how did I get here? So the second thing that I talk about in the book, I said the first one is facing the facts, is we got to be like, all right, I got to own up to this.
Yes.
But the second one was asking for help.
Say it louder for the people in the back. I don't think
asking for help.
There we go. Y'all heard that. Asking for help.
So that's one of the things that I talk to women about, is because, like in your situation, right? Divorce is looked at as such a shameful thing. I have coached women in their 70s that have been divorced for 20 years and they're still carrying around the shame.
Yeah.
Coming from being raised in a faith-based community, it was almost an unpardonable sin. There were times where I was told that because you had been divorced, you can never get married again. You can never find love again. Wait, what? What? So I understand what you were saying about your families having a big part in even making the decision to divorce. I had someone on my podcast, and I'll say her name because we're great friends, but her name is Mel, and she is of Asian descent. And she tells her story where she was divorced and she was contemplating suicide over divorce because it was such a shameful act in her family that she thought it was better for her parents to say, I have a dead daughter, than a divorced daughter.
Oh, Lord.
And my family did not influence me in that way. My family, for the most part, were always like, hey, we're here to support you.
Yeah.
But coming from a faith-based community, it was, I don't want people to know. What are people going to think of me?
Yeah.
And we get into these relationships and we're too afraid to say something. And there are women who have died in relationships because someone has told them, if you leave, God is going to hate you. If you leave, you will never be happy again.
Yeah.
And so, like you, there are many factors that affected those decisions. The reason why I stayed in my second one is because I always told myself, I don't want there to be two. I knew I was making a mistake. I knew I was making a mistake, but I stayed because I don't want to be twice divorced.
Yeah.
I'd rather be miserable for the rest of my life than be twice divorced.
All of those messages, oh my gosh, whether they're internal because of something within our society that has told us to believe these things, or things that people share with you, like you're talking and like things are just rushing back to me. The shame part, 1000%. I was told that I was going to be a disgrace to the family. Literally said I was going to be a disgrace to the family, and that by divorcing, I was ruining my own life. And I was just like, what? There were so many moments where, and I didn't invite too many people into the experience itself when I was making my decision, because it was so important that the decision was mine and not anybody else's. And I think a lot of times people might assume that people will be like, yeah, go ahead, do it, girl, da-da-da. Not one person in my inner circle who I shared this with was like, yeah, girl, go ahead, do it. Every single friend had a suggestion. Have y'all tried therapy yet? Well, girl, you know you're impatient. Like, take a second and think about this. Like, really just like look at yourself and figure out what's going on. Have y'all communicated about this? Like everyone was pushing me, not necessarily back into the relationship, but to see the relationship and how I also play a role, which is what you were saying, right? Like, I will never, ever, no matter what my ex-husband does, ever say that this was his fault. We both played a role in what it was that we created, right? But the messages that were just shared with me, like there was one woman who was married, very clearly and stated herself unhappy in her marriage. And she literally gave me reasons from the Bible why I need to stay in my marriage, and basically told me like everything that I had to say. She was just like, well, you don't want your man to be like that anyway. Or you really want to be out here in these streets because it's looking real crusty. So it was just kind of like either stay here and like be unhappy, or leave and be even worse off. That was the basic message. Stay there. He's not hitting you. He's not cursing you out. He's not cheating on you. So where are you going? That was it. That was the energy. And to be honest, as aware and open and et cetera, as I am, you hear all those messages and you start internalizing them. And you start thinking to yourself like, wait, am I about to be out here in these streets acting like, acting up, or like not really, is this the best that I can do? Like, yeah, ma'am, no, ma'am, stop. Not even just ma'am, anyone. Like, in the moment that you have that question of like, is this the best I can do? You are already acknowledging the fact that this is what not right for you. You're already acknowledging the fact that a need is not being met. So no, this is not the best that you can do. And now it's just a conversation of like, what help do you enlist? And hopefully like mostly impartial beings, which is why therapy, counseling helps. What help are you enlisting to help you then figure out what is best for you, what ways you can grow, what things you do actually want? Because for me, I think the reason why I entered my marriage was because I had everyone else's standards and beliefs around what marriage is and what a good partner is in my head, and didn't even realize that like that was what I used to assess whether or not this person could be my partner, not who I am, what I actually value, what I actually want, how I show up, and what I need to get in partnership, and what I have available and what I have to grow within partnership with someone. So, child. Yes. Child. Child with a D, child with an E. All of it. All the child.
So what you're saying is what a lot of women go through, which is why I started doing dating coaching, is because I wanted to teach women how to date differently, right? So you asked me what help did I enlist. Before I answer that, let me say this. Number one, I am pro-marriage, right? People be like, April, you out here talking about divorce. I am pro-marriage. Yeah. However, divorce can, number one, be an answer to a prayer. And coming from a faith-based background, I've been to 3 years of ministry school, y'all, so I know the Bible, taught the Bible, then preached the Bible, all them things.
Yes.
But let me tell you something. I guarantee you that when two people are standing at that altar that have made a poor decision to marry, God is looking down, going, that ain't me, y'all. That is not me. Don't blame that on me.
Not God tapping out.
No, you know. So when I hear people say, and I don't take divorce lightly, I do believe there's the right way to divorce. So I don't think you should just wake up one day and like, I'm out, right? There's a right way to do it. But when we say things like, well, God put this together, God did this, did he though? Because I can guarantee you in all three of mine, God was like, don't do this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that was an easy out for divorce, because none of those decisions were easy. But divorce can also be an answered prayer. It really can. So who do you ask for advice? Two categories. So there is a personal category and there is a professional category. In the personal category, if there are people that you trust, and when I say that you trust, like you said, you had the lady that was like, if you just do this, if you just do that. And I'm not saying that people that you trust are always going to agree with you, but they will have your best interest at heart. Okay. So there's a personal group. So that is if you have people in your circle that are friends, that are family, that are spiritual leaders, whatever religion you follow, or none at all. But if you have people who are within your sphere of religion that you trust, okay, that's personal. So those people that may know you, you may be part of a community, they might be your family. And when I say might, is because typically your family is too close to you to help you make the best decisions. Because they are going to want the best for you, and we are fickle beings. And so one day I'm on top of the world, stay girl. The next day I can't stand him, when you leaving.
Can I add on a piece of that? Even deeper than that, like you can have people within your family who want the best for you and not even realize that what they want is actually the worst for you and can actually destroy you too. Because that's another piece too that's connected to that. But continue.
Absolutely. And so with your family, I always say assign them the right level of trust. Okay. So there may be things that you can tell them surface, but they may not be the person that you call once again when you're on that emotional roller coaster. Okay. Because they're just going to ride it with you. The other side of that is professional help. So for me, I invested in therapists. I invested in counselors. I invested in books. I invested in conferences. I invested money into getting the right help for people to tell me, here are clinically proven steps to move through grief. This is how you forgive yourself. This is how you don't go back to the same patterns. And so there's two groups, and I say that everyone needs both of them. Don't confuse them. Your pastor ain't your therapist. Your mom ain't your therapist. Even if your mom is a therapist, she shouldn't be your therapist. So we need both. And if you find yourself in the position where you say, April, I don't have anyone personal I can trust, then you might have to just get professional help. And that is why people like me are here to help people through that process. Not many people, unless you've been trained or have had certain experiences, really know how to walk someone through the divorce process. Like I said, there's so many factors, especially if you have children, property, finances, your emotions, your job, your housing. There's just so many things that go into it, where you really need someone who's experienced with helping you walk through that. Same thing if you're leaving abusive relationships, right? This is not something where you just go and kind of cry on your friend's couch to get over it. Go get some help. Understand the patterns, understand the signs, understand how not to get into those situations. So when I say ask for help, ask for help. And it's humbling. It is humbling to have to go to someone and say, look, I have been in this situation and I don't know how to get out. Many of my clients will come to me and say, I have been in this pattern of relationship and I just don't know how to get out. And it's hard. It is hard, because when you think about being with someone sometimes 10, 15, 20 years. This may have been the only person that you know, the only person you've been in a real relationship with. You need to learn how to do life without this person.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's humbling. It could also be life-changing. And so it's super, and life-changing in the most neutral sense of that phrase, right? Because speaking from my own experience, and granted, like, I'm a coach, I'm within the space of behavioral change. And so, like, I could pick up on different things that people who are, providing a service to me are doing, et cetera, right? And I also am not averse to therapy either. And I've been in these therapeutic relationships. And when I went through 3 therapists as I was looking for a therapist after, like, during my divorce process. And so first I'll just name, and I don't know if you have this experience too, finding a therapist is just like dating too, where it's like you also need to be discerning about the person that it is that you invite in to support you, because they may have certain skill sets or certain mindsets around certain things, or even just like there's a lot of faith-based therapists out there too. Keep that in mind as well if you want them to have that perspective, or if that perspective kind of limits them in being able to support you and how you value life and value relationship. Got to be discerning. And I'm going to be honest, the first therapist that I worked with, who seemed phenomenal, woman of color, around my age, like empowering, etc. We had our first official session, and she was asking me, intake questions, things that happen, etc. And there was one question that she had asked me about, like, how my soon-to-be ex-husband had shown up. And I was like, oh, well, there was this one time, like, literally outlier event of something happening, and I didn't really give full context for it. And she was just like shocked, and she was like, girl, you don't watch Lifetime? Like, what? Like, how did you not see? Oh, we need to talk about, like, you overlooking red flags. This is what she says to me. And I'm like, how many more minutes do we have in this session? Seriously, it was the beginning of our session. That session lasted about 20 minutes. It was a 60-minute session. I was just like, all right, I'm done. Because if I was any different, right? Like, if I was still in a place where, like, I felt uncertain about myself, because there was a lot of, like, gaslighting involved in my relationship that even he admitted to doing. And so then, like, you're being gaslit, then someone's admitting that they're gaslighting you, and then you're just like, this is the Twilight Zone. And so it was really important for me to have someone who, like, didn't make me feel like I was crazy, like, for lack of better word, like, literally mentally unwell and unstable. And that moment, I felt like that was very unprofessional. And had I been a woman who felt ashamed about being in that relationship, I would have been like, I know. And, like, it would have killed my self-esteem too. So there is something to be said about still being discerning. Not all therapists are equal. Not all counselors are equal. Not all spiritual counselors are equal. They may not necessarily work for you. And it is super important that, again, even though someone may be there to support you, there are ways in which some of their behaviors or their words may actually help to destroy you. You have to be discerning around that. So I think it's important that you made that distinction between, like, personal and professional, making sure they stay in their own place. And when you think about professional, really be able to look at the skills and whether or not that container helps you better understand yourself, because that's really what it is.
Yes.
Coming to yourself. The relationship is important, yeah, etc. But you got to come back to yourself. And then after you have an awareness of yourself, or while you're growing that awareness of yourself, develop actual skills. Like, learn something new, learn how to do things new, try new things with this with your next person, or, whatever experiences you want. All of these things are super important to, like, really progressing along the journey. But you already know, you talked about this being a grief journey, and grief journeys, when do they end? Sometimes never, right? Like, you go through multiple different phases. Tell me more, because you use the word recovery. That's a very specific word to use when it comes to divorce. Why choose that word? What does the journey look like for your clients?
So when you said, the grief journey, it can sometimes never end, but it will, for lack of better words, shift.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm 5 years out from my last divorce, and the last divorce I will ever have, but 5 years out from my last divorce. And what I can say is there is no longer grief over that relationship. There's no longer grief over that life. But there are moments where it may creep in the plans that I had made, right? So you made a statement just now where you said learning how to do life differently. And so what I share with my clients is when we work together, we are literally creating a new life. The life that you had before is gone. It is over. And I make that as clear as possible. It's gone because every dream, every plan that you made with this person now has to shift. Now, that doesn't mean your dreams and your hopes and desires go away, but they're just going to look different. One of the things that I did about 7 months in is I went to Sedona, which is this beautiful red rock country. I love
so beautiful out there.
Hiking.
Oh
so
my gosh,
Sedona,
Sedona, Arizona.
Oh.
Yes.
But here's the thing. I had a funeral for my old life. I climbed a mountain and I said, look, I am drawing a line in the sand. I will not go back to that old life. I will not go back to those old patterns. I will not go back because funerals are for the living. They're not for the dead. Yeah. They're for the living. That is our chance to say goodbye to that person that is gone. And so I did something tangible to say I am saying goodbye to that life. I am saying goodbye to those patterns. Yep. Now, I still had to, which is number 3 in the book, do the work.
You are doing really well with these plugs, girl. Like, I am taking notes. Y'all take notes. This book is, she went it, girl.
But number 3 yes. is I had to do the work, right? So the journey, I'm still on a bit of the journey, but it looks different. And so there is no time stamp for healing. So my clients will say, well, how long is this going to take? Well, it may take you 3 months to get to this point. It may take you 6 months to get to this point. Yeah. Now, there are some clear indicators of how you're progressing along the journey. Things like your speech. Are you speaking still as a victim? Are you now speaking from future? Yeah. And so as I listen to a client, I can almost understand, okay, you're this far along, or you're kind of out of the woods, but we're still dealing with a few things here based upon their speech, based upon their thought, how they start to see themselves, how they start to talk about the future, how much they're still talking about the past, right? How much ownership they're taking of their life and where it is, or are they still blaming everyone else for where they are? So the journey in and of itself is very personal. It is very personal. Here's the other thing, is that along the journey, we may start to feel okay. And a friend of mine says it this way, just because it doesn't hurt anymore does not mean you're healed. Yes. And so sometimes we're like, I don't feel bad, but then something will happen that will trigger a memory, will trigger a feeling. Also, when you get to the point to where you start dating again, because it's one thing.
Really bubble back.
Yes.
Up. Yes.
It is one thing to say, I've got this great life as a single person and I'm good. But you meet another person that you want to be with. And then those feelings of, well, he used to do that. Yep. Or she used to do that. Or she used to say it like that. Or she used to, tell me these things about myself. Some of that are things that we need to pay attention to because if we're falling back in the same patterns, but some of it is just us being triggered from that past experience.
That is super. Oh, girl, let me get comfy. let me adjust myself. That, and I can't remember who I was having this conversation with, where we were talking a little bit about like what life looks like to be dating again, right? And like to be in a relationship again. And there was something that she was specifically naming around like, well, I'm good. Like I will be good. I've done all these things, et cetera, et cetera. And I was just like, me too. And I'm very much aware that the healing that I've done, the awareness that I have, the comfort the self-love that I have now that I've done in isolation, in singlehood, is not going to completely directly transfer over to who I am in relationship now. Because now, and it's not that now I'm a different person. It's like, oh, well, single enuma is this, and in a relationship, and it's not that. It's more of just now you're meeting another human. And the way that you and the other human interact is also going to bring up things. And so there's another level now of healing. It's just like when I talk to people about the fact that like you dating, you as someone's partner, girlfriend, etc., is not the same thing as being someone's spouse. Yep. It's the next level. You can fight all you want to get into that relationship and to get to the level where you have a ring on your finger or you're established in a certain way. You don't then chill. It's not like reaching the peak of a mountain and you're like, oh my God, this is really pretty. No, there's now the next summit that you have to reach too. So it's the same thing of like, yes, heal, grow, do all of the work, take the time to yourself, reconnect with people in general in like, platonic ways, and know that there's going to be that next level. And it's also going to be really beautiful too, because then you then get to see what it is that you need, what it is that you need to work on moving forward, and hopefully communicate that with your partner if it's someone you want to continue with as well. Because you're still growing, Sway.
Yes.
You're still growing.
Yes. You said something. So one of my pitfalls, one of my blind spots after my first 2 divorces is I kept trying to get healed for my next relationship. Because it was, well, you have to get healed so that you'll be a better wife next time. You have to get healed so you can pick a better husband next time. Yeah. It wasn't, you need to get healed just so you can be a happy person.
Yes.
And so,
what a novel idea.
Right, right. And so that is the primary thing that I coach to, is that when clients come to me and I'll say, well, what are your goals? Well, I want to make sure I'm good for the next relationship. Well, that next relationship needs to be with yourself. And so until you're good in that relationship, we're not even going to talk about a next relationship. Yeah. Because one of the questions and I kid you not, one of the questions I always get is, when can I date? Well, let's see how you date yourself first.
Right.
But really getting to a place to where you love your life. And I say this, my website, everywhere. Create a life that you love. Regardless if you date again 5 years, 10 years. I had a great woman on my podcast back in February, and she talked about her 12-year journey. She was single for 12 years. And what she focused on was creating a great life for herself, not creating a great life for herself until she met the next person.
Yeah.
And that is what I believe we focus on so many times in our healing process is, how can I be ready for the next?
Correct.
And we skip, how can I be ready for me right now?
Correct. Yeah. Literally. Ooh. Moment of silence. There's a lot of moments of silence because you just be spitting the nuggets, and we just need to pause the video if you want to. So important. I'm going to shift gears slightly because something that you're saying brought up something for me where we're talking about the relationship that we have with ourselves. We're talking about the relationship that we have with another person romantically. What about those other relationships on the periphery with family, with friends? And I ask this because I don't know the other way to say. People showed themselves. It's just this happens a lot around death. When someone leaves this earth, right? And all of a sudden people say oh, people's true colors come out. That's when families start acting up and all that stuff. It was almost something similar to that happened. I don't know if you had the same experience where it's certain people that I had as friends, the way that they show up for me came out different. And it wasn't necessarily because of the divorce. It was more of the dynamic shifted. I was no longer the strong friend at that time. I needed help. I needed support. So I got to see whether or not they could actually support me. And then other pieces of just with family. I'll be honest, my relationship with my mother will never be the same. It just will never be the same, just given the way that we interacted. And that's partially because it's really important to me to have certain boundaries for my own wellness and my own well-being. And then also for the next relationship that I'm working on right now with myself, with my partner, all of that. And so talk a little bit more about that aspect, the relationships on the periphery that had nothing to do with you or that person, but friends, family, colleagues, all of that.
So unfortunately, a breakup, I'm not even gonna say just a divorce, right? I talk a lot from the space of divorce because that's the primary audience that I work with. But within a breakup, it doesn't just affect you and your spouse or you and your partner. It affects everyone around you.
Yeah.
In the sense of, some people may feel like they have to now choose. right? So you hear about those relationships that end, and it's like he kept all the friends, I kept all the electronics, right?
Yeah.
And that somewhat happened in my second divorce, where as we continued our relationship, I was submerged more and more into his world and less into the one that I had before we got married. When we divorced, most of the people that we interacted with were his friends. And so I didn't get the phone calls. I didn't get the, hey, let's go hang out. And it's like, but we were friends.
Yeah.
So we have to be mindful that other people are going on this journey with us, and they may not know what to do. Yeah. They may not know how to talk to you. They may not know how to support you in these seasons, right? Especially if it was someone that may have been closer to your spouse than you. They may not know, does she still want me to call her? Does she still want to go and hang out? Okay. So that's number one, is that we just assume that these people know what to do, but they don't.
Important point.
Second of all, it can change relationships, like you said, with your mother. And that's hard. There are people in my life now that we've been friends for a long time, but through these different transitions, our relationships have just changed. Yeah. And so it is unfair to them and to us to not take a step back and say, you know what, if our relationship has changed, then we may have to have some different behaviors. You may not be the person I call every Friday, every morning. Yeah. Doesn't mean I hate you, doesn't mean we're not cool anymore, but we just may not have that relationship, and that is okay.
Yes.
I am a firm believer in respecting people for who they are, okay? If this person is not the person that you can call and cry on their shoulder, you may have to find someone else to do that.
Yeah.
You just might. But at the end of the day, relationships ending, divorce, they affect everyone in that relationship. And so like you said, your family was in that relationship. Your friends was in that relationship. It was your marriage, but you had a community of people in that relationship.
Correct.
And so when that crack starts to happen, not everyone really knows what to do or how to feel. People have their own opinions.
Yep.
Other things is we have to be very sure that we're not putting people in spaces they don't belong, right? So I have a daughter that's 15. And every time I turn around, my friend this, my friend this, my friend this. Is that your friend? Do you know what a friend is?
Ooh.
Do you know what a friend is supposed to be? So now I'm teaching her about different types of relationships. This girl might be your acquaintance and this cool, but this girl and your friend.
Yeah.
And so for us, even as adults, there may be people that we thought were in the friend category that should have been in the acquaintance category.
Correct.
I'll give this example. I was working at a job once, and when they kept using the term, we're a family, we're a family, we're a family, we should hang out, we're a family. No, we're not. We are coworkers. Now, if I choose to befriend one of you, that's fine.
That's something.
But we're not a family.
Yeah.
We are coworkers. And so we have to be very cognizant of the role that we allow people to play in our lives.
Yeah.
Even with people like our mothers and our sisters, not everyone's going to have that relationship.
Yeah. Agreed.
They're just not. Just because they're your blood doesn't mean you're going to have a certain relationship. It is almost expected that because this is my mom or my dad or my sister or my brother, we're supposed to be super close. Give you another example. So my entire family lives in the same neighborhood. So me, my brother, my sister, my parents. We all live a few houses apart.
That's beautiful.
It is great most of the time. When we, no, it is great. We, pick up the kids from school, from sports, all those things. It's a wonderful thing. And when we get together, there's 17 of us. It's amazing. But I take for granted that there are my friends that I have that their siblings live out of state. They don't see each other for 5 years. I see my siblings, like I will run into my brother at Walmart. We see each other weekly. And so not everyone's going to have the same relationship. Not everyone should have the same relationship, the same space that you're giving them, the same time that you're giving them in your life.
Yeah.
Just because they have a certain title.
Titles. Listen, I could talk to you all night, but my producer's going to be like, I got to go to sleep. But you know what I will do? We're going to continue this conversation in the after show. So before we close out, so I asked this of everyone, because you are a phenomenal woman. Your level of self-awareness and intentional action in your life, I'm more than positive that the people who you coach are just like, oh, I'm blessed. And I'm blessed because I get to be around you right now in this moment. And we all know we are all human. There are areas for us personally to still grow. So share with us, like, what is one thing that like April is currently working on right now because it's an area that you want to improve within?
Oh, that's so good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always looking to improve. You know, you said earlier, like, man, I can't believe you can talk the way you talk about, this terrible thing that has happened to you. And it is because I am constantly looking at ways to improve myself. I'm looking at ways to heal myself, right? I'm still on this journey. And so I'm constantly on a journey to say, how can I do better physically, emotionally, financially? So one of the things that I'm investing in, actually, even as someone who works with people in relationships, I'm actually starting a new training for relationships. So I'm not going to say it just yet until I'm done.
Okay.
But it's a big thing. But I'm always trying to hone my craft. Right?
Yeah.
As much as I coach people right now, as much as I feel like I've got a lot to pour out, I never take for granted that there are things that I just don't know.
Yeah.
I never want to get to that space of saying, I know it all. I don't need to learn anything else. And so that's really something I've decided to invest in myself in, is a new level of training in the area of relationships and healing after heartbreak.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. Tell the people where they could find you, please, and thank you.
Hey, everyone. So listen, y'all, if you are wanting to connect with me, and please do, you can connect with me. Just Google April Nowlin, like legit, y'all. It's my website, social media handles, all of the things. So just Google my name and you will find me.
Spell that last name.
Nowlin, like now and later, not now or later.
Which is, it was like, I literally thought it was called a now or later. Y'all know that you thought it was a now or later too. But yes, aprilnowlin.com.
.com.
There we go.
So all my social media handles, my website, April Nowlin, you'll find me.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Thrive with Her podcast. See y'all next time. So, if you've gotten to this point, that means you watched the whole episode. And I am so grateful to you, because to say that was challenging to record would be an understatement. I honestly had a harder time watching it back. That is the most emotionally open and available I have ever been on camera. And I hope that you are walking away with gems and just something came out, from our conversation, from hearing my story and also April's story. So if you are continuing to enjoy the Thrive with Her podcast conversations, definitely subscribe so you do not miss the next episode. You can also leave a review, and I promise I will read it. Now, before you leave, I'm gonna leave you with a thought, not just a word this time around. We talked a little bit about patterns in relationship. I'm telling you right now, the work is in understanding the why behind you engage in relationships in the way that you do, for relationships that are unhealthy and toxic. And that starts with you, not with thinking about the other person, whether it's the friend, the romantic partner, the family member. It starts with you, because not only are you the one who changes it, you also need to be aware of what those types of dynamics are feeding into within you, and what's at the core of you believing that type of relationship is what it is that you want. And maybe you don't even want it. And so how can we start to shift that? By paying attention to it and then putting an end to it. That's all I got. Honestly, I'm still reeling from the conversation. Definitely tune in to our next episode. Until then, take care of yourself.